Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Larson, and this is my channel. It's just Larson's channel. I should probably come up with a better name, but I haven't. If you're new here, welcome. Feel free to subscribe. Introduce yourself in the comments. I'd love to meet you. And for all the folks coming back, it's good to have you back. I'm sorry it's been a minute. I've been traveling a good bit this last several weeks on business and have more coming up. So this may be a rough month, October, for videos, but I set the pace pretty hard there early on. I think I recorded 4 or 5 days a week for a couple weeks there, and now it's just been busy. So anyway, I'll stop making excuses and I'll start recording videos. So that's what you're here for. So thanks again for being here. So today I want to talk about education, and it's a big topic. We could go kind of a lot of different directions. One of the things I'll say is I don't think education is a savior. I think that's one of the narratives that we hear a lot in this country, the rags to riches stories of people who came up out of bad circumstances and got themselves an education and they moved on up. I just don't believe it. I think education is a tool, has been a tool that people have used for socioeconomic ladder climbing, and whether that's good or bad, I'm kind of indifferent. You're welcome to use education in that way if you'd like to. It's mostly, though, about networking and signaling what part of society you belong in than it is about the things you're learning. But that's another conversation. What I want to talk about is the different kinds of education. It's kind of become, liberal arts have kind of become a byword in today's world, and nobody but the goth kid and the hippies get a liberal arts degree. Why would you do that? And the joke is, you get a liberal arts degree so that you can, work at McDonald's when you grow up, but be able to understand, be able to ponder, what is a fry, right? What is the meaning of fry? And hardy har har, that's funny. But the thing before we start, this drives me crazy every time. I mean, I see it. I've got kids now who are in high school, and whenever they talk to someone, well, are you going to go to college? Where are you going to go to college? And then the very next question is, what kind of degree do you want to get? And my kids often talk about wanting to go to my alma mater, New St. Andrews, and they talk about getting a liberal arts degree. And then people go, well, what do you do with that degree? What kind of job do you get with that degree? And it betrays this underlying assumption we all have about what college is for and what college does. And, with the exception of a few obvious trades, okay, there's the trade schools, which you're not getting usually a bachelor's degree. You're getting an associate's or less. Things like HVAC and plumbing and welding. That's a trade school, right? But then in the kind of university world, there's been this proliferation of degrees. And it's like communications degree, business degree, a bachelor's in business and communications, or whatever, right? Women's studies, and these degrees. The assumption is, well, if you're going to get a degree, you should get one that's going to get you a good job, right? And I think a lot of that came from. I think, this is my theory, is that my parents lived through the Depression and also were, born into a recently post-industrial world where farming, the way of life, the agrarian way of life was kind of going away. And the way to move up was to have a solid, steady job. And they saw farms get wiped out, Dust Bowl. I had family all through the Dust Bowl. And it was hard times, right? And so But those college professors, they weathered it, and those people with good jobs in the city, they weathered it okay, a lot of them. And so I think it was kind of beat into their kids, my parents, that you got to get a good degree. You got to get a good degree because you can always fall back on that, which I understand, man. I totally understand, and I don't want to like snub my nose at those stupid people who thought that way. It's not stupid. They were dealing with a certain set of circumstances, and were trying to advise their kids and how to be more resilient. And I get it. But what I would say is that I think there's an absolute place for trade schools, absolute place for vocational schools. I don't think the degrees that you get at a bachelor level at a university, a college, I think anything outside of the liberal arts, a lot of times as an undergrad, is kind of worthless, and you need to go get a master's anyway, really, to be proficient in what it is that you are pursuing. And so, if you really want to be an engineer, you got to go get a master's at least. If you really want to be a physician or a lawyer, you've got to pursue a graduate degree anyway. And so again, what's the point of a business undergrad? When really, if you're going to get hired to run a big business by a big company, it's not going to happen with just a business undergrad. You're going to have to work your way up from a company, and so the degree didn't really get you anywhere. So I'm getting ahead of myself, though. I want to contrast these degrees and against liberal arts education. I think I'll start by just asking the question: what is the purpose of education, and especially what's the purpose of a college education? To me, it is taking root of, for my kids, it's taking root of their faith. It's taking root of it's sort of your kids transition from the home into the world, and it should be the beginning of building their house on a rock, on a firm foundation. The tragedy to me is that so many Christian kids leave the house and they start to build their foundation on really crappy sandy soil. They from day one start imbibing in a lot of garbage from whatever fad the Marxist fad, more likely than not, is being taught in state schools. So it's the purpose to me of a college education is laying a foundation for this new household. But more broadly, I think education is supposed to be training for life. It's supposed to instill discipline, right? Are you learning? So first of all, just ask yourself as I go through this, how much in a 4-year state college education, how much of this is happening, right? Training for life, how much of that's happening? And by the way, a lot of this is happening. It's inescapable whether it's happening or not. The question is it happening in the way that you'd want? So first, is it training your kid for life? Well, yes, it is training them for life. Is it training them in the ways you want them to? Okay. Instilling discipline, right? Discipline, the word discipline or disciple, the Latin word discipuli, is basically just the word for student. So being a student, enrolling in education is instilling discipline. Again, it's happening. What kind of discipline are you learning? Are you learning how to think, how to study hard? Are you learning how to figure out how to get more work in every day than you used to be able to as a kid? Are you learning how to wake up earlier? Are you learning how to right? Are all those things happening? So another purpose of education is learning how to think. So you are learning how to think in college. You're being taught how to think about the world. You're being given tools for taking information and processing it and making sense of it. At least that's what should be happening, right? Is that happening? Well, again, yes, it is happening. Is it happening well? I don't know. Depends on the degree. a lot of times on this point, I think a lot of schools fool themselves into thinking, well, we're not teaching people how to think. We want everyone to think for themselves. We're just giving them information. And that's the real purpose, is we're just filling their heads with lots and lots of information, which is silly, because there is no neutral transmission of information. It always comes with a bias. It always comes with a narrative. And so that can't happen even if you try. But the question then becomes like, is that really? It's the whole teach a man to fish versus giving a man a fish. Like, if you're just giving him information, what are they going to do next when they leave? Are they any further along? Are they any better equipped for life with a head full of information, or they need to actually learn how to think? The big thing to me is they should be learning to love good things. This is what I think we really want to happen in college, is we want our kids, our young adults really, to learn to acquire a taste for good things. And when I think about, I've heard virtue defined as rightly ordered loves, right? Training your affections. This is what virtue is. This is what being virtuous means. And this is something that we should be learning, right? As we're leaving our home as young people and starting out on our own, we need to, I would think, an undergrad degree should be the place where we learn to love good things. We learn about what music is good and what music isn't, and why some music is good and some music isn't. How to evaluate a piece of poetry or a piece of literature. How to tell good stories. How to communicate well. How to love a great speech, or how to love a great argument, right? And appreciate a great argument. So these are all things that I think should happen, and ultimately I think college should be about obtaining wisdom. And I do think wisdom is not something you can sort of gain in the abstract. I think wisdom is a person. It's pictured as a person, as a lady, and it's someone that you've got to become acquainted with. And I think wisdom is best caught versus taught. You have to be around wise people. You have to observe wise people. I think in a lot of times, in order to really obtain wisdom, it comes through imitation. So being around high caliber wise people and watching them live and think and process information is a really wonderful way to become wise yourself. So that's what I think education ought to be, and what we ought to be, what should be happening in college. So then the question is, well, okay, but what about the job thing? Well, first of all, gosh, there's so many different places to go, but first thing I'll say is people change jobs. I've seen statistics on this. I don't know I didn't take the time to look this up, but the last statistic I heard, which I think is probably conservative now, was that the average person by the end of their career today has had like 3 to 4 major career changes. So not just like lateral moves or whatever, promotions within a company, but like major changes, like going from, like in my case, working at a software company in customer service and sales, a software and data company, over into a biotech company, and also doing concert promotion and starting some businesses and doing consulting. And it's been pretty wild, right? And I'm still relatively early on in my career. So I've had several. I'm now in the healthcare space, physician staffing, right? And it's like, who knows where this will be by the time it's all said and done. But I think this is normal. That didn't used to be normal. And again, I want to sort of, my hunch is that this goes back to some of that reaction from from the Great Depression of people going, you got a good job, you stick to it. And also, I think the transaction costs of finding employees have been lowered dramatically. So I actually was looking at or listening to tapes that my grandfather recorded way back in like the 50s and 60s and 70s, and I listened to a tape where he talked about he was recording. This was like in the 70s. He was recording tapes for my uncle who was overseas with the military, and he was just kind of catching him up on life. And he talked about being offered a job, right? He worked for the Chevron pipeline, and they offered him a promotion to move out to Salt Lake City. And I just thought, gosh, that doesn't happen anymore. Like in so many of the corporate world, like I've talked about this in another video, that it's really hard to really get promoted in a company these days. It tends to be that that they want to, if you're good at your job, they want to keep you there. But that's because finding someone to put in that job opening up ahead of you is a lot easier now than it was before. Before the speed and the ease with which somebody was able to find someone and interview them and check their references and all that stuff was a really slow, long process. And so you'd already done all that work with a person that works there. So anyway, I diverge. The point I'm making is that I think careers used to be very long. People used to be very settled in their jobs. They're, bird in the hand. And now people change jobs, change careers a lot. And so you don't really know what you're going to be doing, right? You don't know what you're going to be doing long term. I don't. And so why would you make this big decision about all this money you're going to spend as you are forming your new household and as you're leaving the home, and you're picking what you're going to focus the next 4 years of your life on, educationally? Why would you base that on some hunch that you have as a kid about what job you want to have someday, what thing you want to be when you grow up? I wanted to be, I think, a marine biologist at one point. I can't remember. There were a lot of different things I wanted to be. So this is one thing, though, I'll say about my sons and about me when I was a young man at that age. These are things I do know about them. Okay, more likely than not, my sons will be members of a church. Okay, they will be husbands, Lord willing. They'll be fathers. They'll be citizens at the state, city, national level. They'll be citizens. They'll more likely than not be employees. They'll be co-workers, right? So already we've got, 6, 7 different things that they will be that I'm sure of. I'm positive that those things will happen. Okay, I'm not positive they'll be a husband or a father. We'll see. But they will definitely be, more likely than not will be. I certainly want to prepare them for that regardless. Now, how is the communications degree helping prepare them for for all of those things? What about that business undergrad is helping them with prepare for those things? Are any of, again, the only answer is, well, it's going to help them get a job. I'll just tell you, just to dispel the myth, people don't, with degrees in those things or in science, aren't getting good jobs, like good paying jobs. It is not their degree that gets them good jobs. I worked at a biotech company where we had master's level scientists, kids with science and biology degrees who started at really crappy low wages doing really boring office work. They were at a biotech company using that degree. But they were doing the same job that people with liberal arts degrees were doing. Their ability to move up the ladder had everything to do with their work ethic and their discipline, and a lot of those things I was talking about earlier: training for life, discipline, their ability to think, etc. Right? And so, but I also hope that in all of those things, their church, their family, etc., as a citizen, that they're going to also be a leader, right? They're going to be a leader in their church someday. They're going to be a boss. They're going to be a public servant, potentially city council or school board or whatever. The other thing they're going to be for sure is a consumer, right? Of media, of goods and services, right? So again, how is your degree? How's your education? Whether it's a science degree or biology degree or microbiology degree, how are those things preparing them for that whole list of things I just rattled off? And there's so many more. And I think the answer is for most of those kinds of degrees from state schools, the answer is they're not preparing you. They're preparing you really poorly for most of those things. They're not preparing you at all for those things. And again, I'd like to posit that the problems in our country today are not the result of a lack of degrees, of people with good 4-year degrees, right? I just don't think that's the case. We'd probably be worse off if we had more people with 4-year degrees. That's not the problem in our country. And so I do think I do think the problem is that we don't have enough people who have been educated well, who have received a good education. And that's where I think liberal arts comes in. And if you've been hearing all this and you're like, Larson, what are you talking about? Have you seen a liberal arts program at these schools these days? They're a mess. I will totally grant that. Liberal arts today is not what liberal arts has been and should be. And there are good liberal arts programs are few and far between. And so I will totally grant that. But the name liberal arts is supposed to be about training a free man. A liberal, comes from the word freedom, right? Liberty. And it's a free man's education. It's not a slave's education. It's not a worker bee's education. It's a free man's education. And it's supposed to prepare you for thinking and for leading and for training others and for inspiring others and for processing complicated sets of information and making difficult decisions. And it is for all of those kinds of things. And I think that those are the kinds of things that we are struggling with today. It's training to have backbone. It's training to have historical context, to be able to look at what's going on in the world around you and go, this is not the first time that the world's seen this by a long shot. And being able to look at the patterns that have played out in other times and places, and being able to respond with wisdom and with knowledge, and skill. So, I'll conclude this long video, this long rant about education by just saying that I think a good education and really a good liberal arts education is it's really an application, first of all, of Deuteronomy 6. Teaching our children about God, recounting his kindness and helping us remember his mighty works throughout the ages. This is one of the core functions of education, and a good education does that. I think good education is obedience to Proverbs. Proverbs commands us over and over to seek wisdom and pursue it. And so I think that's what good education is. I think that it trains our hearts and our minds and our souls. It orders the loves of our hearts and minds and souls so that we can obey the first greatest commandment, which is to love God with all of our heart, soul, and mind. And of course, if you're doing that, if you've trained your heart, mind, and soul, and are able to love God with all of those things fully, because you've ordered your loves and have learned to love good things, then by extension, the second greatest commandment, to love your neighbor, is going to follow, right? And finally, I just would want to reiterate that I think a good education equips, empowers, emboldens those who receive it to to engage in the world around us, to be leaders, to be free men and women. It makes us dangerous to God's enemies because we're not slaves. We're not slaves literally, but our minds are not enslaved. Our hearts are not enslaved to our sin. Our minds are not enslaved to the vapid ideologies and worldviews that most people don't realize they've completely swallowed hook, line, sinker without even noticing. They don't even know what a worldview is or what an ideology is. They're living it out all day, every day. It's basically the operating program that they are running on, and nobody told them, hey, you should get in there and delete that. You get in there, you need a different one. That's a bad one. That's one that's been tried and has run some civilizations into the ground, and is going to lead your heart and your soul away from God and His goodness. So I'll stop there. It's a long video. I didn't realize when I set my hand to the plow that I was going to have so many things I wanted to say, but I appreciate you, whoever you are that is still watching and listening right now. Thank you for listening to me rant about education and liberal arts. I hope it was interesting. I hope it was helpful. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your comments, your concerns, your prayer requests. Send them down. I want to hear them. It's great being here, and I hope to upload another video here soon. All right. Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you.